My name is Trevor Baker. I'm 31 years old, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I love taking day hikes in the Blue Ridge Mountains. In October, I decided to hike the Black Ridge Trail in Pisgah National Forest, not a particularly popular route, but one with a beautiful view over the valley. I left early, at 6 in the morning, and parked at a small lot at the trailhead. Besides mine, there was only one other car there, an old blue Chevy pickup with no state plates. The first 3 hours were unremarkable. Yellow leaves, the smell of wet earth and pine, a woodpecker knocking somewhere in the distance. I passed two women with a dog, said hello, and kept walking. Sometime after noon, I noticed someone had nailed a makeshift sign to a tree at a fork in the trail. A piece of plywood with a chalk-written arrow, shortcut to overlook. The arrow pointed away from the official trail on my AllTrails map. I stood there for a moment, thinking maybe the locals knew a shorter way, and headed in that direction. The path narrowed, the trees grew denser, and sunlight barely made it through the canopy. I'd been walking maybe 20 minutes when I heard someone behind me. Steady footsteps in the leaves, matching my own pace exactly. I stopped. The footsteps stopped too. I kept walking. They started again. I turned around several times, but saw no one. Just trees and fog starting to settle in. I told myself it was an echo of my own steps bouncing off the slope. That happens in the mountains. My breathing quickened a little, but I kept going, looking for the overlook the sign had promised. Instead of an overlook, the trail led me to a small clearing where an old hunting trailer sat on wheels, rusted over, with a broken window. The door was slightly ajar. Beside the trailer, items were laid out neatly on the ground: a backpack, a pair of boots, an unfolded tent, as if someone had just started setting up camp and then vanished. Nothing looked old or decayed. The items looked new, almost dry, even though it had rained the night before. I called out, "Hello, anyone here?" No answer, just water dripping from the trailer's roof. Then I heard a sound from inside. Something like a long exhale or sigh. Slow, almost human. I didn't go check. I turned around and headed back the way I came, trying not to run, even though every cell in my body was screaming too. The footsteps behind me started again, faster now, as if someone was trying to catch up to my pace. I only reached the main trail when the fog began to thin and I saw the official AllTrails marker. The footsteps stopped. I got back to my car after dark. The blue pickup was still there, headlights on now, engine idling. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove off without looking back at the truck. The next day, I called the Pisgah National Forest Ranger office to report the abandoned trailer and ask about the shortcut to overlook sign. The woman on the line told me there was no registered hunting trailer or side trail in that area, and that two hikers had gone missing on the Black Ridge Trail over the past 3 years. Both last seen near that same fork. I don't hike there alone anymore, and sometimes, when I'm walking any trail by myself and hear footsteps behind me matching my own pace, I no longer try to convince myself it's just an echo. My name is Kevin Ashford. I'm 29. And I was riding a Greyhound overnight from Salt Lake City to Reno to visit my sister for Thanksgiving. I'd taken the bus before. It's cheap. And I don't mind the long haul through Utah and Nevada. We left just after 9 p.m., about 15 passengers scattered across the seats. The driver, a heavy-set man named Gary, who announced our first stop would be Wendover around midnight. I settled into a window seat near the back, put in my earbuds, and watched the lights of Salt Lake City fade into the dark salt flats. Somewhere past the Bonneville Speedway, most people had dozed off. The bus was quiet except for the hum of the engine and the occasional cough from someone up front. Around 1 a.m., I woke up because the bus had stopped. Not at a station, just on the shoulder of I-80. Hazard lights blinking. Nothing around us but dark desert and a few distant lights that might have been a ranch. Gary was standing outside, talking to someone through the open driver's door, but I couldn't see who. I figured it was a mechanical issue and went back to half sleep. When we started moving again, I noticed the bus felt different, quieter. Somehow, I glanced around and realized we had fewer passengers than before. The older couple that had been sitting across the aisle. The guy in the Broncos hoodie rose up. Gone. I told myself people get off at stops I'd slept through. It happens. I checked my phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual out there. But the timestamp on my last text message was 11:47 p.m., over an hour before the stop I remembered. I couldn't account for where that hour went. Somewhere near Wells, Nevada. I got up to use the restroom at the back of the bus. On my way back to my seat, I passed a woman I hadn't seen before, sitting alone near the middle, staring straight ahead. She wasn't looking at anything. No phone, no window, just forward, completely still. As I passed, she said, without turning her head, "You're not supposed to be on this one." I didn't respond. I sat back down and stayed awake the rest of the way. My heart going to fast asleep again. We pulled into the Reno station around 6 a.m. I grabbed my bag and got off as fast as I could, not looking back at the woman or anyone else. My sister picked me up, and I told her I hadn't slept well on the bus. I didn't mention anything else. A few days later, out of curiosity, I looked up the Greyhound schedule for that route and date. According to the official records, no overnight bus ran between Salt Lake City and Reno that night. The route had been suspended for maintenance and wasn't reinstated until 2 days later. I still have my ticket stub. The date on it matches the night I traveled. I don't know what bus I was actually on, or who else was riding it with me. My name is Nathan Priestley. I'm 38, and I travel for work more than I'd like, mostly regional flights for a medical supply company based in Columbus. In late November, a snowstorm grounded my connecting flight out of Denver International, and I ended up stuck overnight in the terminal along with maybe 100 other stranded passengers. By midnight, most gates had gone dark. The shops were shuttered behind metal grates, and the terminal had that strange hollowed-out quiet airports get after hours. The hum of the HVAC system. Distant announcements nobody was listening to anymore. The squeak of a cleaning cart somewhere far off. I found a row of empty seats near gate C36 and settled in with my laptop bag as a pillow. Around 2 a.m. I woke up because the terminal lights had dimmed further than before, down to maybe half the fixtures still on. I figured it was some kind of energy-saving mode. Looking around, I noticed most of the other stranded passengers I remembered from earlier were gone. Not unreasonable. Some had probably found hotel vouchers or rebooked flights. But the man who'd been sleeping under a Broncos blanket rose down was still there, in the exact same position, not having moved at all in what looked like hours. I got up to find a working vending machine and walked toward the food court, empty except for the shuttered kiosks. That's when I noticed the flight information screens overhead were cycling through gate numbers and times that didn't match anything on my boarding pass or the app on my phone. Flights to cities I didn't recognize. Departure times that didn't correspond to any date. One board briefly flashing a flight number that was just my own confirmation number repeated twice. I told myself it was a system glitch from the storm. Back-end software throwing errors overnight. Airports have technical problems. I'd seen weirder screen malfunctions before. Walking back toward my gate, I passed a TSA agent standing perfectly still near an unmanned checkpoint, not looking at anything in particular, hands folded in front of him. I said good morning out of reflex. He didn't respond, didn't blink that I noticed, just stood there as I passed, and something about the stillness made the hair on my arms rise before I even reached my seat again. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Around 5 a.m., the terminal lights came back up fully, gate agents appeared, coffee shop grates started rolling open, and the ordinary chaos of a delayed morning resumed. Announcements, rolling suitcases, people complaining into phones. The man under the Broncos blanket was gone. The TSA agent at that checkpoint, when I glanced over, was a different person entirely. Scanning boarding passes like nothing had happened. My flight left at 7:40 a.m. as rescheduled. I never mentioned any of it to the gate staff. mostly because I couldn't have explained what exactly I thought was wrong. Only that something in those hours between 2 and 5 a.m. hadn't felt like the same building I'd fallen asleep in. Months later, I mentioned the flickering departure boards to a friend who works in airport operations at a different hub. He went quiet for a second, then said overnight system glitches happen sometimes during storms, but that he'd heard similar stories from more than one person about Dia specifically, always between those same 2 or 3 hours, always describing gate numbers and flights that shouldn't exist. I still fly through Denver sometimes. I just try never to get stuck there overnight again. My name is Corey Danvers. I'm 30, and last spring I booked a weekend Airbnb in a small town called Millfield in rural Ohio, planning to hike nearby and get some quiet riding done. The listing was a converted farmhouse, cheap for the space, with only one review, 5 stars, short, saying simply peaceful stay. Host was great. I arrived around 6 p.m. on a Friday. The host, a woman named Diane, met me briefly to hand over the key, mentioned she lived just down the road if I needed anything, and left before I could ask much else. The house was clean, a little dated, smelled like fresh paint over something older underneath. Mildew, maybe, from the basement. That night I wrote for a couple hours in the kitchen, then went to bed around 11. Around 1 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a door closing somewhere downstairs. Not slamming, just a normal, deliberate click of a latch. I lay still, listening. Floorboards creaked once, then silence. I told myself old farmhouses settle at night. Pipes contract, wood shifts with temperature changes. I didn't get up. In the morning, I noticed the basement door, which I was sure had been closed the night before, was standing open. I didn't remember opening it. I went down to check. Just a normal unfinished basement, a washer and dryer. Some boxes labeled in marker with someone's name that wasn't Diane's. I didn't think much of it. Probably left over from a previous owner. I spent the day hiking a trail outside town, had dinner at a small diner where the waitress asked, almost casually, "You're staying at the Hargrove place, right?" I said I didn't know that name, that I'd booked through an app. She just nodded slowly and changed the subject to the weather. That night, the door sound came again around the same time. 1 a.m. This time I got up and checked the whole downstairs. Every door was closed, exactly where I'd left them. But the kitchen window, which I remembered locking, was cracked open a couple inches, cold air pushing through the gap. I closed and locked it again. Checked twice. I didn't sleep well after that. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, one at a time, pausing between each step. I stayed frozen in bed, staring at my closed bedroom door, waiting for a knock or a turn of the handle that never came. The footsteps simply stopped, somewhere near the top of the stairs, and that, nothing. No creak of retreat, no further sound at all. I left before checkout the next morning, texted Diane a vague excuse about an early departure. She responded quickly, "No problem, hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you want to book again." Back home, curious, I searched the address online. The property had changed ownership twice in the last decade. One old real estate listing, cashed from years back, mentioned the house had been sold following an estate settlement to the previous owner. A man named Walter Hargrove had died in the home. The listing didn't specify how, only that it had sat vacant for almost 2 years afterward before being renovated and resold. I never left a review. I still don't know whose name was on those basement boxes, or why the waitress asked about the Hargrove place like it was common knowledge nobody wanted to say out loud. My name is Ryan Coleman. I'm 34, and every October I go camping alone at Silver Lake, a small campground in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, not far from Marquette. I've been coming here for years. It's quiet after the summer crowds leave, and the fall colors around the lake are worth the drive from Chicago. I arrived Friday afternoon, checked in with the campground host, an older man named Frank, who ran the place with his wife. He mentioned only the other sites were occupied that weekend. I picked my usual spot near the water, set up my tent, and spent the evening fishing off the small dock, the air smelling like wood smoke and damp pine needles. Around 9 p.m., sitting by my fire, I noticed a light bobbing across the lake. Someone with a lantern walking along the opposite shore, where I knew there was no trail, just dense woods. I figured it was another camper out for a night walk and didn't think much of it. The next morning, I hiked a loop trail around the lake. Partway through, I came across a section of shoreline directly across from my campsite, the spot where I'd seen the light. There was no trail there at all, just thick brush and fallen trees. Nothing a person could easily walk through, especially at night, especially carrying a lantern. That night, the light appeared again, a little earlier, moving slower. I called out across the water, my voice bouncing oddly off the still surface. "Hey, you good over there?" No response, just the light pausing for a moment, then continuing its slow path along the shore before disappearing into the trees. I told myself it was a reflection, some trick of the water and the dark. But the fire felt colder that night, and I found myself checking the tree line more than I wanted to admit. On my last morning, I mentioned it to Frank while packing up. His expression changed slightly, not quite alarm, more like he'd heard the question before and wasn't sure how to answer it. "Some folks see that light," he said, wiping down a picnic table. "Been going on since before we bought the place in the 90s. Story is a hunter went missing out there decades back. Never found. We don't go looking into it much. Folks who come back a second time usually don't mention it again." I asked if anyone had ever gone over to check the far shore during the day. Frank said the county had, a few times, after complaints, found nothing. No trail, no cabin, no sign anyone had ever been able to walk that stretch of shoreline at all. I haven't been back to Silver Lake since. But sometimes, late at night, if I'm near any body of still water and catch a small light moving where it shouldn't be able to move, I turn around and go back inside before I let myself watch it for too long.